My name is Carol Westbrook, and I got into sleep, interestingly, through my husband, Philip. My background was in organization and management, and I met Philip for the second time in our lives and decided to marry him and move to Rochester, Minnesota from California, where I had lived my entire life. And wondered what I would do because I was moving away from all of my support group. And at the time, I was running a printing business, which I owned, and was still involved in politics, which I had been involved in for several years. So I got to Rochester, Minnesota, where it was very, very cold. Had to adjust to that. And Philip, I believe you've probably seen his interview before this, but he was getting interested in sleep, and through that and the need for an organization where physicians would be trained and could learn something about sleep, an organization was developed, which is now the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Philip came back from a meeting and said that Bill Dement had agreed to a membership, an individual membership, but wasn't quite sure how all of that would happen, how it could happen. The ASDC, American Sleep Disorders Association of Sleep Disorder Centers, had been around for quite some time, an organization made up only of centers. And so with Bill's acceptance of the idea that, okay, perhaps we needed an organization that would help to bring actual physicians into the fold, he agreed to the development of the Clinical Sleep Society. But it wasn't to be separate. It was really founded as a committee of the ASDC. So Philip asked if I would help with that endeavor, and being delighted, because there was going to be something to do except knit in the cold winter of Minnesota, I accepted. And for a couple of years, we ran that out of a room in our home. The ASDC and the CSS actually operated as one. There was no funding for the Clinical Sleep Society originally, and so that made it a bit difficult. We bought our own computer, first computer we ever had, and learned how to operate it. This was in '82, I believe. And actually, I think they rented it from us. I think they paid us $200 a month until it was paid off. So then it belonged to them. Again, back to my political days, I knew how to do mailers and advertising. And since most physicians interested in the sleep at all, and almost everyone in the ASDC, were from the psychiatry division. That was our first target. So we did a mass mailer to the, the academy, I've forgotten what it was, of psychiatrists, and got a good response. It was very exciting, actually, to get a response to that first mailer, and therefore our first income through membership dues. That's how we started. And then I remember one day we went to the, what is it? American College of Chest Physicians. And we had our brochures, and there was a in their big lecture room, we had a little table sitting right outside the door. So when people came out of their lecture here, we were, Philip and I, sitting at a table with these brochures that they didn't even begin to understand, and they were really, in all honesty, not done very well. Neil Cavey came out of that meeting, and he picked up a brochure, and he said, "Looks like a religious handout." But he became a good friend and supporter, and joined. So that was our second attempt. And then we did mailers to all of the professional organizations. Well, we needed to get membership in order to get funding. So our first target was membership. After we achieved our initial goal of having some members and therefore some funds, it became obvious to me and to Philip that the way the organization currently was set up was not financially solvent. It needed to, because there were many offices, the office of the president and the office of the treasurer and so on, and our office, which was free. But it became clear that we needed to centralize. That concept was taken to Bill DeMint, who agreed, asked me to be the director of it, and I agreed. And so now we had membership. Now we had to look at making it financially stable. That took a lot of doing. A number of the ways that things had been done in the past, for instance, the journal Sleep had been published by Raven Press forever. And I knew that it had always cost more than it produced for the association. So it was a loss center that I knew could be turned around. And so I worked with Christian Guilleminault, who had always been in charge of the journal, and convinced him and showed him on paper what I believed could be done, and so that it could be a significant revenue source for the association. And together, we worked that out. We were able to find a publisher so that we self-published the journal, and it did what it was supposed to do. It became a revenue source. And the same thing for the annual meeting, which just made me laugh when I saw what had happened, because I was first introduced to that at a meeting in Seattle. Yes, it was in Seattle in '85. And after that meeting, was hit with a bill for an exorbitant amount of money. And so decided that had to change. And in 1986, we took the planning of the meeting away from institutions and ran it ourselves. And that meeting had its first income. It became a revenue center from that point on. Helmut Schmidt had that meeting, and it made $50,000, and we were all ecstatic. That was a great deal of money and big help. And from that point on, it has been a significant source of revenue, and helped to fund all of the other meetings that needed to take place in educating physicians and technicians. So that was, I guess, one thing that I'm just thinking about is that the organization, the ASDC, had been primarily run by Bill DeMint, pretty much from its inception, I believe. And he had to give up a lot in order to centralize the management of the new association, which became the American Sleep Disorders Association, I believe, in 87. And at that time, there was still a need to combine all of the associations, the SRS and the APT and all the acronyms. And so we formed, again, another association, another set of bylaws, another incorporation, which was the Association of Professional Sleep Societies, which incorporated all of the groups. Bill became president of that. And as extension, I became the executive director of that. And then we moved all of the associations into our one central office in Rochester. And so I was the executive director of the SRS and the APT and any one other group of acronyms you'd like to use. It was a very interesting time, but Bill maintained his leadership role through that venue. The original organization was set up in Rochester. Philip and I moved from Rochester in 1989, and when I was given money by the Academy to start the National Sleep Foundation, and we moved to Beverly Hills for family reasons. I continued as executive director for the ASDA at that time, while I set up the National Sleep Foundation. That was an interesting time. And after a couple of years away from Rochester, realized that really the staff there needed a director on site and resigned my position. Well, in the beginning, where physicians knew nothing about sleep and the public knew really absolutely nothing about sleep, the American Academy, I'm going to keep saying that because that's what's in my mind now, was dealing both with the public and spending a great deal of money interacting with the public and also the physicians, the professional side of it. So the board and I decided that because a foundation would be able to take funds that at the time the Academy was reluctant to take from business, and that could fund a great deal of what we were trying to accomplish with public education. We wanted to include on that board people who were not in sleep, just to make it more legitimate. And so we had an attorney and we had an accountant, a CPA, to be on a board. Other than that, it was all members of the sleep community who were on the original board. And it's somehow managed to still stay on its feet after all these years, 30 years, I believe. I can't say that I personally had ambitions. I did want to have the foundation established, so I felt very comfortable in having accomplished that. Also, the Academy was then on quite a sound financial footing by the time I left. So yes, I was proud of that. And I think we were off to the beginning of a way more professionally run organization. When we had permission to set up a national office and rent the space, hire staff, that in itself was an enormous, enormous step, because it was such a divergence from what had happened previously, the way the sleep had gone previously. And I was very, very, very fortunate in being able to find people to come and work for the Academy who became very dedicated. They did not have any benefits. They had very low salaries. And yet they were there all day, weekends, if they needed to be, nights.